In the 1980s, Colgate, yes, the toothpaste brand, launched a line of frozen lasagna. That's not a joke. It actually happened, and it flopped so badly that it became a textbook case of branding gone wrong. But here's the strange part. Colgate wasn't alone. Dozens of household brands tried similar stunts. So why did they do it? And what made Colgate's flop so legendary? This is the story of corporate ambition, marketing delusion, and one of the most baffling brand extensions in history. In the 1980s, branding wasn't just part of business. It was the business. Suddenly, marketing departments weren't just making ads. They were setting strategy. Brand equity became the buzzword of the decade as companies realized their logos and slogans carried real financial value. A strong brand wasn't just a way to sell a product. It was the product. If consumers trusted you for one thing, why not 10? This opened the floodgates. Every brand manager in America was asking, what else can we slap our name on? Branding went from being about consistency to being about expansion. The age of brand synergy had officially arrived. By the mid-80s, the biggest players in consumer goods weren't just selling one thing, they were selling everything. Procter & Gamble had their hands in everything from diapers to dish soap. Nestlé wasn't just chocolate, it was coffee, pet food, frozen pizza. General Foods, a sprawling empire. Diversification was the name of the game. Wall Street loved it. Investors saw sprawling portfolios as smart, safe bets. Synergy became gospel, the idea that different parts of a business could feed each other's growth. If you dominated one shelf in the supermarket, why not the whole aisle or the whole store? It was empire building, brand addition. It started small. Ivory, a soap brand, launched Ivory shampoo. That made sense. But then came colas with branded jackets. Lifesavers tried soda. Bic, the pen company, made perfume. Suddenly, any brand with name recognition tried jumping categories. The logic? If consumers love X, they'll trust us with Y. Sometimes it worked, like Dove, expanding from soap to lotion, but often it flopped. Brands weren't asking if it made sense psychologically, just if it looked good on a spreadsheet. The result? A wave of bizarre, short-lived product launches that felt more like stunts than strategy, and the strangest was yet to come. By the 1980s, Colgate was solid, safe, synonymous with toothpaste. Your dentist recommended it, your parents used it, and your bathroom cabinet probably had a tube. But beyond oral hygiene, Colgate didn't have a cool factor. It wasn't trendy like Revlon or diverse like Unilever. It was functional. The brand image was clean, clinical, and a little boring. And that was the point. They owned their niche. But in an era obsessed with synergy and expansion, being a one-trick pony started to feel risky. So while Colgate was dominating the toothpaste game, its execs were staring at the competition and wondering, are we playing it too safe? Inside Colgate's corporate offices, the pressure was mounting, and their rivals were everywhere, launching frozen meals, skin creams, air fresheners. It was the era of brand empires, and Colgate looked increasingly like a quiet little kingdom. The boardroom conversations shifted from what do we do well to what else could we do? There was a fear of missing out, not on profit, but on relevance. Brand managers were under pressure to think bigger. Consultants pitched synergy decks. Colgate wasn't just a toothpaste brand anymore, it was a platform. And one idea that kept popping up somehow was food. After all, what do you do right after dinner? If you grew up in the 80s, you remember frozen food was everywhere. Microwave ovens were the must-have appliance, and TV dinners had evolved from soggy trays into gourmet convenience. Lean cuisine promised health. Stauffer's promised comfort. Swanson was a household name. Supermarket freezers were booming, and the margins looked good. for companies already making packaged goods, and it felt like easy expansion. Same logistics, new category. So when someone at Colgate floated the idea of a frozen meal line, it didn't sound insane, just strategic. After all, everyone else was doing it, and so with remarkable seriousness, Colgate began planning the launch of Colgate kitchen entrees. As strange as it sounds, there was a kind of logic behind Colgate's frozen dinner experiment. For one, this wasn't Colgate's first flirtation with food. Decades earlier, the company had dabbled in dry goods and processed foods, especially in international markets. They already had some food labs, distribution contacts, and manufacturing partnerships. Plus, internally, the pitch was deceptively simple. People trust Colgate, they trust us with their health. Why wouldn't they trust us with their nutrition? To the marketers pushing it, this wasn't a frozen food line. It was an extension of the brand's commitment to wellness. From minty mouths to full bellies, inside Colgate's marketing department, someone cooked up a vision that looked good in a PowerPoint, a unified lifestyle brand, one that looked after you from breakfast to bedtime. Toothpaste in the morning, mouthwash at lunch, healthy lasagna for dinner. The memo used words like synergy, continuity, and trust halo. They imagined a brand that followed you through the day, not just in the bathroom, but into the kitchen. The frozen meals would be light, health conscious, and affordable. It would be a wholesome system with Colgate as the caretaker of your daily routine. But there was one problem. No one asked if consumers wanted that kind of relationship. Despite some internal hesitation, Colgate gave the project the go-ahead. The idea had too much momentum and too many slide decks behind it to stop now. Test kitchens began churning out frozen entrees. A few internal tasting panels gave them a polite thumbs up. Focus groups weren't exactly enthusiastic, but they didn't throw up red flags either. The logic seemed sound enough to keep moving. Colgate wasn't planning a huge rollout. They'd start in a few regional markets, test quietly, see how shoppers reacted. What could go wrong? After all, it was just food. It wasn't like they were putting fluoride in the lasagna, right? So in the mid-'80s, with little fanfare, Colgate kitchen entrees began to appear in frozen food aisles. No massive ad campaign, no celebrity chef endorsement, just a few boxes of lasagna, beef stew, and chicken parmesan with the word Colgate proudly stamped on top. To the marketers, it was a soft launch. To shoppers, it was a hard pass. Imagine reaching for dinner and seeing the same name you associate with brushing your teeth. There wasn't outrage, just bafflement. It didn't feel wrong so much as weird. The lasagna itself wasn't bad. It just came from the wrong brand. And in marketing, that's all it takes. Colgate's frozen dinners didn't bomb because of taste or price. They failed because they made people uncomfortable. When a shopper sees Colgate in the freezer aisle, their brain short circuits. That name means mint. It means toothpaste foam and that weird feeling after a cleaning. It does not mean beef and tomato sauce. Consumers weren't mad. They were confused. Some thought it was a joke. Others assumed it was some kind of dental food. Either way, sales barely registered. The product quietly disappeared, and yet the whole thing left a lasting impression. A perfect example of how brand psychology can override business logic. We don't just buy brands. We feel them. That's what modern neuroscience and behavioral marketing have shown us. When we see a brand name, our brains light up with associations, memories, feelings, expectations, and those associations are sticky. You can't just switch categories and expect people to follow. If Colgate had launched a salad dressing or a protein bar, it might have worked, maybe, but a full frozen meal, that required too much cognitive rewiring. Consumers couldn't make the jump. Brand trust doesn't automatically translate across categories. It has to feel right. And Colgate dinners felt like a dare. To make matters worse, Colgate's design team stuck with the familiar. Same color palette, same font, same box layout as their dental products. It was meant to inspire trust, a visual cue that said same company you love. But instead it amplified the weirdness. Shoppers said the meals looked like medical food, or worse, like they might taste minty. The branding was clinical, not comforting. Jokes started flying. One ad exec reportedly called it dinner that freshens your breath. Even the in-store placement didn't help. Stuck between brands like Stouffer's and Hungry Man, Colgate's frozen food just didn't belong, and everyone could feel it. Even before the lasagna hit shelves, Colgate ran into a wall of skepticism, not from consumers but from the retailers themselves. Grocery store buyers were confused. Why would they dedicate precious freezer space to a toothpaste brand with no food pedigree? Distributors balked. Slotting fees were high, and no one wanted to gamble on something so far outside the norm. To many in the frozen food world, Colgate was an outsider, a health and beauty brand muscling into a culinary arena it didn't belong in. Without trust from retailers, placement was limited and awkward. Some stores buried the meals in remote corners of the freezer section, if they stocked them at all. Once the meals made it to stores, the whispers began. Early customers weren't kind. A few food columnists and local reviewers took notice, and the sarcasm started flowing. Minty fresh meatloaf, one joked, on early online message boards, and in print ads, Colgate frozen meals became a punchline. The kind of thing people dared each other to try. The public couldn't tell if it was real or satire. And that ambiguity killed trust. Even if the product had been Michelin-starred quality, it was too late. The narrative had taken hold. Colgate made toothpaste. Now it wanted to make lasagna, and that just felt ridiculous. Inside Colgate, the mood shifted fast. Sales reports came in, and the numbers were brutal. Returns piled up. Distributors began pulling back. Marketing teams scrambled to salvage the launch, repackaging the boxes, tweaking the recipe, softening the branding. But nothing changed the fundamental issue. People just didn't want frozen dinners from a dental hygiene brand. Focus groups were blunt. No matter how good the food might be, they couldn't get past the name. Executives began distancing themselves. The idea that once seemed synergistic now looked like a branding blunder. The buzzwords were gone. All that remained was a quiet sense of corporate embarrassment. Within months, the project was already in retreat. Colgate didn't hold a press conference. They didn't make a public statement. They just stopped. Orders dried up, shipments were canceled, grocers quietly removed the boxes from shelves, and the brand never replaced them. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a PR disaster. It was something worse. It was forgotten. Or at least that's what Colgate hoped would happen. But you can't quietly back out of a mistake this strange. The dinners disappeared, but the story, porn, and the confusion lingered. People remembered the feeling of seeing Colgate lasagna and thinking, wait, what? Years later, the story resurfaced. Marketing professors dug it up for lectures. Business blogs listed it among the worst brand extensions of all time. It started popping up in retrospectives, branding think pieces, and listicles alongside Crystal Pepsi and New Coke. People were fascinated, not just by the failure, but by how sincere it had been. This wasn't a joke. It was a real attempt by a serious company to pivot into a new market. That earnestness made it even funnier in hindsight. The image of a toothpaste-branded frozen meal stuck in pop culture. Colgate lasagna became marketing shorthand for just because you can doesn't mean you should. So what really went wrong? On paper, the move made a kind of corporate sense. Brand trust, distribution overlap, wellness alignment, it all sounded logical. But brands don't live on paper, they live in our heads. And emotionally, Colgate was too far from food. No matter how they spun it, consumers couldn't bridge the gap. A lasagna from Stouffer's made you feel nostalgic. One from Colgate made you feel confused. That discomfort mattered more than any market data, because at the end of the day, consumers don't buy with spreadsheets, they buy with instinct. And instinct said, this doesn't feel right. Brand experts later pointed to a deeper problem. Colgate's entire identity was built on what comes after food. It was the thing you used to wash away garlic, onions, and sauce, not something you associated with creating those flavors. That's not just a branding problem. It's a psychological one. You can't rewire decades of emotional context. Overnight, consumers had built a mental wall. Colgate equals cleanliness, not cuisine. And once that wall was up, no amount of strategy, synergy, or spin could tear it down. Colgate didn't just miscalculate the market. They underestimated the mind, and that made all the difference. Not every brand extension is doomed. Some work brilliantly, but usually for one key reason. They stay emotionally consistent. Take Dove, for instance. There's Dove soap and there's Dove chocolate. Same name, but they're completely different brands. Different logos, different vibes. No one's brushing their teeth and thinking about truffles. Or look at Nestlé. They've always been a food company. When they branch into snacks, cereals, or even coffee machines, it feels natural. There's a thread of consistency. Consumers don't have to mentally shift categories. That's the difference. Colgate didn't create a new identity. They used the old one, and it clashed hard. Colgate wasn't the only one caught in the 80s and 90s brand extension fever. There was Bic, famous for pens and razors, who thought disposable underwear made sense. Lifesavers launched a soda that fizzled fast. Even Coors tried bottled water, betting the brand's Rocky Mountain purity would carry over. It didn't. These weren't failures of manufacturing. They were failures of meaning. Brands were stretching in ways that consumers just couldn't follow. Colgate happened to be one of the earliest, but the lesson kept repeating. Brand equity isn't infinite. Just because you can slap your name on something doesn't mean you should. Colgate's frozen dinner flop wasn't a bad idea in isolation. The food was fine. The market was hot. The logic checked out. But Colgate misunderstood the most important asset it had, what the brand actually meant. To customers, Colgate was clean, clinical, almost medicinal. It wasn't about flavor or indulgence. It was about removing those things. And that's not something you can just pivot from with a memo. In trying to stretch their brand into a new category, they snapped it. Colgate learned painfully that a brand isn't just a name or a logo. It's a story. And the lasagna didn't fit the plot. Today, Colgate lasagna lives on in marketing infamy. You'll find it in textbooks, branding case studies, Reddit threads, a perfect example of what happens when corporate ambition outruns common sense. It's become a meme, but also a meaningful warning. Don't ignore how people feel about your brand. The internet never forgets, and neither does consumer memory. For Colgate, the frozen meals faded fast, but the story stuck. And in a weird way, that failed lasagna ended up doing something no toothpaste ever could. It taught the world a lasting lesson about emotional branding. In chasing synergy and diversification, Colgate's marketers did what a lot of companies were doing at the time. They looked at their brand through spreadsheets instead of human experience. They saw trust as a transferable asset, but ignored what that trust was rooted in. Brand psychology is more than awareness. It's emotion, it's memory, it's 1,000 tiny interactions that build a feeling. And Colgate's team thought they were launching a new product, but in consumers' minds, they were crossing a boundary. The product didn't feel trustworthy. It felt wrong. And that gut reaction is what defines brand loyalty. These days, smart companies know better. Instead of stretching their brands to the breaking point, they build new ones. Google didn't call its smartphone the Google search phone. It launched Pixel. Amazon didn't slap its name on everything. It spun off Ring, Alexa, and Kindle. Apple keeps tight control of its product names, ensuring they all feel like they belong. Modern brand strategy is less about synergy, more about clarity, because marketers finally understand what Colgate didn't back then. People don't buy logos, they buy trust. And trust depends on knowing who you are and staying in character. Colgate didn't fail because people didn't trust it. Ironically, it failed because people trusted it too much, but only in one narrow lane. Colgate meant oral care, cleanliness, the minty bookend to a meal. That trust was so deep, so specific, that when the brand tried to jump into food, it short-circuited people's instincts. Consumers didn't reject Colgate's lasagna because of price, taste, or even packaging. They rejected it because it felt like a betrayal of the brand they knew. The name didn't travel, and that's the paradox. The stronger your brand's identity, the harder it is to stretch. Trust, once built, becomes a boundary. What Colgate learned the hard way is this: a brand is a promise, not a product line, not a logo. It's a deeply emotional contract between company and customer. People don't just buy what you sell, they buy what you stand for. And when Colgate slapped its name on a frozen dinner, it accidentally broke that promise. It wasn't a culinary disaster, it was a branding one. The lasagna might have been perfectly fine, but the story was off. The emotional math didn't add up. That's what made people pause. Not the food itself, but the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. None of this means brand expansion is doomed. Far from it. The best companies do stretch, but they do it wisely. They build sub-brands. They shift tone. They ask, does this feel right to our audience? Dove pulled it off by staying close to its emotional core. Apple expands with surgical precision. Even PepsiCo owns oatmeal. Under Quaker, not Pepsi. The secret is honoring the story people already believe about you. Expansion isn't just a strategy, it's a psychological maneuver, and when it works, it feels seamless. But when it doesn't, you get lasagna that tastes like cognitive dissonance. Colgate lasagna is easy to laugh at, and let's be honest, it is funny. But beneath the punchline is a powerful reminder. Brands don't live on shelves. They live in people's heads and hearts. They're stories we buy into, sometimes without even realizing it. So when those stories suddenly shift, our instincts push back. That's what Colgate missed. Not the market trends or profit margins, but the feeling. In the end, that's what every great brand has to protect. Because when a product makes you pause and say, wait, what? The sale is already lost. So, what do you think? Was Colgate just ahead of its time? Or was this always doomed to fail? Drop your thoughts in the comments, especially if you've seen other bizarre brand moves that made you stop and wonder. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, subscribe for more deep dives into strange business history, and share this with someone who still thinks Crystal Pepsi was the weirdest idea ever. And if you want to go deeper into how brand psychology got this powerful in the first place, check out our last video. The wild story of how Procter & Gamble helped turn clean into a national obsession. Trust me, it'll make you look at your soap a little differently.